Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
This is Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast with your host, Bruce Hutchin, episode number 273. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is part 2 of Audrey Pfaffe, Pepin County, Monarch Whitetail Nutrition. And she's going to break down how she and Andrew hunt the rut. In the beginning, in the seeking phase, the chasing phase, the lockdown phase, in the post-rut phase. Bucks are available. Mature bucks are available to harvest, to put on the ground during these periods of time. She's going to break it down to us. So sit back, have a note and paper, because you're going to want to take notes on what this lady has to say, because she knows whitetail. Hey, listeners, don't forget to text 33444. Food Plot for your free Food Plot ebook. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is part 2 with Audrey Pfaffe from Monarch Whitetail Nutrition. And she lives in one of the prime places in the United States, in Pepin County, just north of the famed Buffalo County. And guess what, folks? There's a lot of large bucks. There's spooner bucks in just about every single county in Wisconsin. But some places there are just more of them because of the terrain and minerals and everything else. So, Audrey, and as we ended up yesterday's show, we were talking about the rut and the different phases that you see, and we were even talking about muzzleloader hunting after the rifle season. But let's get back and help the people, because this show is going to be aired next week for sure. And what I want to do is help people understand in western Wisconsin how you and Andrew hunt the early season, and then when it starts turning cold, how you hunt cold fronts, and then how you hunt the seeking phase, chasing phase, the rut, actually when they lock down the does, and then the post-rut. So could you start off with just, the first weekend and the first week or so of the season?
All right. So early season, we almost try to stay out of the woods early season unless we've got a good one, really well patterned, because we really don't enjoy hunting early season that much. It's here in Wisconsin, end of September or mid-September, it's still 80, 90 degrees out, and there's still, softball-sized mosquitoes out there that are going to drive you insane. And it's not enjoyable to be out there, for us anyway, especially if, if you do end up shooting a deer that evening, you really don't really have an option to let it lay overnight, because it's so warm, the meat's going to spoil, and it's almost like wasting a deer. And so early season, unless we've got a good one patterned, we'll stay out of the woods. We'll just let them kind of do their own thing, and we kind of focus on a lot of duck and goose hunting at that point. But we will hunt afternoons from time to time, especially if our freezers get low. We want to take a couple does out and do some doe management. So we'll sit on basically just food sources. The middle of the woods is usually so thick, especially all the leaves are still on the trees. It's still really green. You can only see probably 10, 15 yards in the middle part of the woods anyway, even with shooting lanes cut. So basically early season, if we're going to hunt, we're hunting food sources, and we're hunting afternoons only. If you go in there early mornings during early season, a lot of the times the deer are still out feeding at that point, because they're going to feed when it's cooler out, in the evenings and the early mornings and overnight, just to get out of the 80, 90 degree weather and away from mosquitoes and such things like that. So if we go in there in an early morning, a lot of times we're going to bust those deer out of their food sources, or we're going to, more or less kind of clash with them on their way to their bedding source, or to their bedding area from a food source. And so we'll basically just hunt afternoons only, and we won't even get out there till probably 4 or 5 in the afternoon, just because a lot of times the deer won't come out until that coveted, deer 30, 20 minutes right before it's dark. So I guess that's kind of the only way we really tackle early season. Once it starts cooling down and we start getting some nice cold fronts coming through, we still only usually hunt just late or like later afternoons, but we'll get out there a little bit earlier, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30, especially if there's a nice cold front coming through and, you know, the high temperatures are going to be in the 50s and 60s versus 80s and 90s. And that actually worked out really good this past Sunday for my hubby. He shot 2 does in 10 minutes from the same tree. His arrows, actually, I've never even seen it before. They both made a complete pass through on the deer and stuck into the ground, and his arrows were only 7 inches apart while they're stuck in the ground. So literally, the does came down the same trail and were in the exact same spot when he shot both of them. So I mean, he was pretty excited. He sent me the text message with a picture of these 2 bloody arrows side by side stuck right in the ground, and he's like, "You can't make this up." So,
no, you cannot.
No,
I'd love to see that picture. I'd love to see.
Sure, I'll send it to you, definitely.
Let's stop right here. One thing that happened on the farm that I've been blessed to hunt for so many years, they took Garrett took a 180 buck that he watched all summer, had him patterned, knew right where he's going to be, and the buck came right where he's going to be, and he shot him. What do you do if you have a Mr. Wonderful? You know, we're talking 150 or larger class deer, and you know he's there. How do you hunt him, or do you just let it go and say, you know, I'll catch him later?
Well, no, I mean, if he's patterned and we've got, you know, a lot of trail camera pictures and he's coming in consistently, you know, 2 or 3 nights a week at, you know, roughly about the same time period, we're definitely going to get in there and try to get that deer, especially for, I don't really know how it is in other parts of the country, but for where we are, I mean, you can scout all summer. We've got, you know, hours and hours of camera footage of velvet deer, you know, out feeding in the fields that we've tried to get patterned. But for us, it seems like if they shed their velvet, they completely do a 180 and change up their pattern. So it's like, if you can get on them while you can get on them, you definitely should. Like, don't hesitate and be like, oh, well, you know, I'll get him later. He'll be there later, because there's a good chance that he won't be there later, or there's a good chance that, you know, the neighbor across the road also has pictures of him and he's going to get in there and get him. So, I mean, if you have a good one pattern, definitely capitalize on it while you can. Don't hesitate, because there's no guarantee that he's not going to get hit by a car tomorrow, or, you know, someone else is going to get him, or he's going to peel his velvet and be, you know, 2 miles down the road. You know, it's just, if you can get him, I wouldn't hesitate. But for us, it seems like we've got them patterned, and then they peel their velvet and then they split. So for us, it hasn't happened.
And yesterday's show, we talked about, you'd seen already some immature deer, you know, chasing does because they're starting to get frisky and they don't know what their hormones are doing. They only know one thing: they need to find our girlfriend. And so when does that, you said that's starting right now. So we're at October, 8th, 9th, 10th, when that kicked in your area?
Oh, yep. It was on Sunday that my hubby had a 6-pointer chasing a doe. I mean, he was full blown, like, you know, head to the ground and trotting after her. He said he was grunting up a storm. He was chasing her in circles and circles, and obviously this doe isn't anywhere near coming in heat yet, so she just kind of wanted to get rid of him, but he would not leave her alone. And I feel like it's starting a little bit earlier this year, but we have had a decent cold front come through here in the past week, and after Thursday, it's actually supposed to cool off a lot and be, you know, lows in the high 20s by the end of this week. So I think maybe the little guys are starting to get frisky because of changing temperature, and the does are kind of off on their own now that they've kicked their fawns away and stuff. So they're trying to get it in before the big guys come in and push them out of the area and I guess whip them a little bit. So, but yeah, it seems like it started a little bit early this year, but it's still fun to see. I mean, for us, it's entertaining to see deer interacting and doing what they're supposed to do. It's fun for us.
I agree with that. And one thing that I noticed, and I put up on the Rut Report, if you go to my Facebook page, Rut Report, I posted both there and Twitter. I watched the weather, and even though I live in Colorado, I just put Alma, Wisconsin, and I just see what the weather change is. And I knew that something was going to happen last weekend because of the differential. And you get a 20-degree differential in temperature. So 90 to 70, 70 to 50, 50 to 30, you get that large change. The deer are going to move. And that's scientifically founded. The deer are going to move. So you have to pick your steps and just pick your stands. Now, in a cold front, what kind of stands do you like? Over food plots or in transition areas or close to bedding areas? Where do you like to set up?
Just for me personally, I like transition areas a lot because they seem to be a lot less, wary about when they're in a transition area. When they're in a bedding area, they're kind of on high alert because, they're staying in one spot for a longer period of time. So they got to be, their guards up a little more. When they're in a food, on a food source, same thing. They're going to be in that area for a longer period of time. They're going to be eating. They're going to be doing stuff. There's most likely going to be more than one. So their guards are going to be up. They're going to be a lot more alert. When they're in a transition area, it's more or less they're kind of just on a mission to get from point A to point B. And obviously their senses are great and they're always, they're always aware of their surroundings and on alert, but it almost seems like they let their guard down a little bit when they're just cruising through from one area to the next because they're not in that area for a long period of time. And especially for me, I try to hang my stand 20 to 30 yards off a main trail so that I can get a shot, within a comfortable shooting range of them on that trail. I don't want to be right on top of the trail because then I'm not going to have a very good shooting angles because I'm going to be literally right on top of them. It's going to be a steep angle, and they're going to be more aware of my presence being that close to them. But if I'm off the trail a little bit, I'm going to have, a good 20, 30 yards to draw and get, I'm not right on top of them. They're usually not looking 20, 30 yards to the left or the right of them. They're usually looking in front of them and above them. And especially if it's a transition area, they're focused on getting to that food source or getting to that bedding area or getting to that water source. So they're kind of focused on that versus the little trail they're walking on.
When you think of transition areas, do you take into account the topography of the area, or how? I guess the question is, how do you define a transition area? Because we know they have bedding areas and they're going to feed or they're going to go to water at some time during the day. But do you look for specific topography to set up your stand, or how do you choose your stand site?
A lot of it has to do with, we do a lot of like early season or preseason scouting, especially like in the winter time. It's a great opportunity to do that because you can physically see their trails and their footsteps in the snow. So you can see, what trails they're taking, what routes they're walking and stuff like that way better than you can obviously in the summertime when all the leafy green forage and stuff is all grown up. So when a lot of time when we're shed hunting or whatever in the spring, we can see, oh, look, they actually do come through here a lot more often. Or, we thought they took this trail, but it looks like they're walking way more on this trail. So we'll scout early. We'll figure out exactly where their footsteps are, where they're walking. And then from there, we'll try to find a decent tree or a decent spot that would be a good setup, 20, 30 yards from that spot. A lot of the time, especially like in the rut, we love hunting ridge tops. It just seems like they just run ridge tops a lot more than just being on flat ground, or they're usually down in valleys or they're up on ridge tops. That's what we found anyway. So I would much rather sit a ridge top right in the heart of the timber. Pretty difficult to get to. It's off the beaten path by a lot, but it seems like they'll run those a lot more in the rut than they will, be out in just a cornfield or a bean field or something like that. So definitely terrain has a lot to do with it. But for the most part, just early season scouting and figuring out where the deer are versus where we think they're going to be is what we try to do.
Let's talk about the seeking phase. In your opinion, the seeking phase happens when?
Usually for us, it's right around that Halloween. The does aren't coming into heat just yet, but they're getting there. And some of the bigger does might be coming into heat because it's based on weight for when they come into heat. Like some, this year fawns, if they're born a little bit earlier, or maybe if they were a single doe fawn versus a triplet, she's going to be a little bit bigger and heavier. And usually once they hit about 60, 65 pounds, they can start coming into heat. So some of the heavier does that maybe didn't have a fawn this year, they might be coming into heat a little bit early. So usually right around that Halloween or just before Halloween is when we start to see a lot of chasing movement, a lot of seeking. And they usually don't come into heat, I guess, for us anyway, usually until, first week in November, maybe second week in November.
So, and folks, that's a seeking phase. So what type of stands we want to be in during that time?
Definitely during the seeking, you want to be where there's going to be the most amount of deer. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is if there's a ton of does coming into a food source, you want to be where those does are going to be, because they're going to be a buck magnet. If there's one that is in heat or might be coming into heat, there's going to be a buck on her. And so I guess if you find the does, you're going to find the bucks. So if the does are, still out in a lot of food sources, I would hunt food sources. If they're, if they're going to be in a cornfield and they're constantly coming to this cornfield, I would sit off that cornfield just a little bit, maybe on a main trail that they're taking to get to that cornfield, somewhere where there's going to be a good amount of deer and does congregating, hanging around, and they're going to be bringing in the bucks. But as far as I'm concerned, live decoys are the best decoys. So if you can find a doe that's, in the area, I'd sit where that doe is going to be.
Well said. Then chasing happens, and to me, once the chasing phase begins, all bets are off. You got to do one thing. You got to be in the woods, and I try to do all day sits during the chasing phase. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. For us, we found, as we spoke on the part one, that it's so sporadic and it's so random where these deer could be. I mean, it's like you said, all bets are off. They have one thing on their mind, and that's find a girlfriend, get her bred. Find another girlfriend, get her bred. That's what they want to do, and they really won't rest until they do that. So it's no longer they're only coming out in the early mornings and the evenings to feed, and then they're going to bed during the day. They're chasing all the time, and you never know when that big one may be coming by chasing a doe. They're no longer just nocturnal. They're no longer just early morning and dusk. They're out and about at all times of the day, and the longer you're out there, the more hours you put in the tree stand, the better chance you're going to have an opportunity at a buck whenever he may be coming through.
Let's talk about where your setups are during the chasing phase. Some sets that are better than others, or it really doesn't matter, just get in the woods?
I think as long as you're in the woods, you're going to be all right, just because it is so random where they may or may not be coming from. But for us, we found that if you're in like some thick, brushy, almost like good hiding spots for the does that are trying to get away from the bucks, that's where I would be. We have a bunch of our good friends are actually loggers and own their own logging businesses. So they'll come through, an area and they'll log it, and there'll be a lot of big treetops. It'll be really thick and brushy, and that's where those does want to go, because they've been getting chased and basically beat around and exhausted by these bucks, and they're not ready to stand and be bred yet. So they want to get away from them, and they want to hide, and they want to just lay down and rest. And so if we can get to a spot where we think it's thick and overgrown and brushy, and if there's a lot of good hiding spots, we'll try to be there or just a little bit off of that, because, you kind of got to feel bad for the does at that point, because they're not ready to get bred, but they've been getting chased by every single buck in the county, and it seems like once they can shake one buck and kind of hide from him, there's another one popping up ready to take his place. So they're exhausted, and they kind of just want to hide and lay low. So we're going to go and sit in these areas that they're not bedding areas, but they're almost like good hiding spots where these does can kind of just catch a breather for a minute and get away from these bucks and try to shake them. And
Audrey just said something important. It's not the traditional bedding areas, because you can identify them on your land pretty easily. But what I found is islands, and I can remember one year there were like 3 or 4 does out in this fairly large cornfield, but it was a dip, and there were some rocks and other stuff, so they couldn't farm it, and they let the trees grow up and brushy, and there was a few does just all in there, just trying to get their breath, and you could see them. And it's very interesting to look for those. I call them islands, safety islands or security islands or hiding islands, and it could be in the timber, as Audrey said, where they've done some logging, but they clean it off pretty good. But there's still some treetops that created. We're not even talking 100 by or 200 by 200 square feet, just little tiny places where does just go, I need a break. I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that sounds?
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And it's kind of cool just to be in those areas, because even if while you're sitting there and hunting, there's no deer around you at all, there could have been an hour before you got there, and that doe could have peed in that area right before you got there. And now you're going to have 2-3 bucks coming through and checking these areas where they know the does do hang out. Just because there's not one there doesn't mean there wasn't one a little bit ago. And these bucks are still going to come through and be checking these hot spots where they think these does are or where they think the does were. And it's still a good idea to be in those areas, because you never know when one's going to be coming through seeking a doe that was there.
Let's talk about the lockdown, or when actually the mature bucks, the big guys, have found 1 or 2 does. They're in wherever, hiding. I've seen them in the middle of just CRP lands, middle of cornfields. They just basically, the does are laying down, and they're not 15 yards from them, 10 yards from them.
Mm-hmm. It's such an exciting time. I mean, I actually do know a lot of people that don't even care to hunt that period of time, because I've heard them say it a million times. Oh, well, the big boys are all locked down, so I'm not even going to go out. And it's like, for me, that's one of my favorite times to be out, because I think I have a lot of my dad in me with this aspect. Is I love spot and stalk. I just crave to do it. I feel like such a predator to be out there and to literally be stalking them like a mountain lion or whatever, and to creep right up to them when they don't know you're there is just such a thrill. I mean, I did my a spot and stalk last year, and I closed the distance from 120 yards to 10 yards on this deer. And by the time I get up to him and I'm just about ready to draw, it picks up its head, and it turns out that it's a nubbin. So obviously I didn't shoot it. If it would have been a doe, she would have been in deep trouble. But just that alone, just knowing I did that, that was such a thrill for me. So during the lockdown period, if you've got the land to do it on, if you got the amount of property that you're, that you can do a spot and stalk or glass form and then try to close the distance, that's such a good time to do it, because that doe is not going anywhere. She's tired and she's laying down and she's just done. And that buck is not going to leave her side, because he's kind of claimed her, but he will get up and chase off the little boys that want to come and check her out too, because she's reeking of estrogen and estrus at this point. So any buck within 2 miles is going to know that and is going to try to come check her out. But if that big mature buck is there with her, he'll get up and chase off little bucks all day, but then he'll circle right back and lay down next to her. So as long as she's not moving, he's not really moving either. And it's a great opportunity to try to close the distance and just wait for him to stand up, basically. I guess the first time I really seen that happen, I think I was maybe 17 or 18, and I had this great spot out in the timber, and it was during this lockdown period, and I had seen, it was one of my better nights in the stand. I must have seen 7-8 different bucks come by, and the biggest one that was up cruising on his feet was maybe 120-inch 8-point. It was just a lot of the younger bucks that, were seeking the doe, that they weren't mature enough to be the big boy on campus to get her locked down and to be down there with her. But they're in the seeking phase, and they're all rutted up, and they're rubbing on trees, and they're sparring, and they were acting tough. But this big buck, the biggest buck that I've ever had an opportunity at, was laying down with this doe, and she was bedded maybe 70, 80 yards from my stand, and I was there for an all-day sit, and he was right next to her all day. And I kid you not, they were bedded down for 7 or 8 hours. She did not move an inch. She didn't flick an ear. She didn't anything. Laid down for 8 hours. But this buck, every time one of these little guys, they'd cruise right past my stand. They'd make a beeline right for her. He'd get up. He'd grunt. He'd roar. He'd snort wheeze. He'd chase them off. He got in a little bit of a fight with one of them. And then he'd kind of circle around and be all bristled up, and he'd lay down right next to her. And I actually got to sit here and watch this all day, this awesome scene unfold. And then right at dark, like I couldn't see my pins anymore. It was way too dark to shoot or anything. She gets up, just takes her deer sweet 10, walks straight down the trail right to me, to like 35 yards, perfect broadside, and he was right next to her. I mean, he had to be 160-inch 10-point. He's just beautiful, perfectly symmetrical, and we actually nicknamed him the Buffalo because he was so bristled up, so dominant, and just chasing these little guys around all day. I mean, the body on this deer was just incredible. So we named him Buffalo, and he just took with her all day. And I mean, the only time he got up at all was to chase off the little guys. So it was so fun to sit there and watch that unfold. And it's one thing to read about it. It's one thing to, to watch the pros tell you about it on TV, but it's another thing to actually sit in there and see it happen. And especially for them to have no idea that you were there watching this awesome thing unfold. It was one of the better nights I've ever had hunting.
I wish I had been there. That sounds just like, wow, because you're really there. And I can remember a couple of years back, my buddy who's been hunting a long time, we got set up and everything, and he had shot a doe. So I said, okay. And it was during rifle season. So I said, I'd go up and help him. And then all of a sudden, I see these bucks chasing. And I go, Dick, look, they're chasing. He goes, what? I said, yeah, they got a rodeo going on. And the poor does, I mean, she got 3 bucks on them. And so there was one mature buck in there, and he came out and took a breather in the field before he went back into the fray, and I shot him because he just took a breath. And the funniest thing is, I double lunged him, and he just stood there like he'd never been shot. And then he went back, jumped over the fence, and then tried to re-engage. Obviously, he was dead. And it was just amazing because I thought I missed him. I said, no way I missed him, which I didn't. But I've never seen a deer. He just took the shot and just didn't flinch or anything, and then walked back, jumped over the fence, and went another 100 yards before he just dumped. And it's so exciting, folks. And if you haven't seen it, just like Audrey said, she sat there all day and had this wildlife scene in front of her that you couldn't, even if you video it, nobody'd believe you. Yeah, they would. But I mean, just the experience. And that's what hunting's about. It's not about the kill, the harvest. It's about being out there. Your thoughts on just being out there, Audrey?
Oh, that's all it really comes down to for me. I mean, yeah, shooting a deer is great and having the thrill of it and, bringing it home and celebrating with your friends and family and talking about the hunt, reminiscing. That's all well and good, but that's not really that's not what it's about. I mean, like I said before, my best day of hunting, I didn't even pick up my bow and, put my release on there or anticipate getting a shot. My best day of hunting was just being out there and being surrounded by all action and actually watching nature unfold the way it would when there's absolutely no human disruption at all. I mean, slipping in there and they're just acting like deer. They're doing their normal thing that they would do that most people don't ever get to see. It's almost like, well, I just actually watched an interview with Chris Pratt. He's an actor, but he's also an avid hunter, and he was saying that, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound if no one's there to hear it? He's like, you'd be there to hear it, because to nature, you're not there, because nobody knows you're there. The animals don't know you're there. Nature does not know that you slipped in there and are sitting there so quiet, and it's just unfolding around you the way it would even if you weren't there to see it, but you are there to see it.
Well, you put a lot of good information out there, and guide. This is the second part. So, Audrey, how do people get a hold of you, find out about Monarch Whitetail Nutrition? So just share your social media stuff, and then we're pretty close to wrapping the show.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. My Facebook is just facebook.com/Team AA or facebook.com/Monarch Whitetail Nutrition. My Instagram is Audrey_Pfaffe_28. And on Skype, it's Audrey.Pfaffe28.
Thanks so much for that. And you got the time in the show right now to give some shout outs to friends. And hey, let's give a shout out to your neighbor, Jimmy Davis. And Jimmy, he's got some good photos this fall already, so I wish him well. So give some shout outs to friends and neighbors, and then we're going to wrap the show.
Okay, I guess honestly, a shout out to my dad, Tim Peterson, who got me into hunting, taught me everything I need to know. I'm an only child, so I'm my little daddy's girl, but I'm also the son he never had, which is why, I would go to Sunday school in my little pink church dress, and then immediately afterwards change into my little muddy rain boots and my blue jeans and go feed cattle with him, and then go hunting with them. So it was kind of cool that, I got to be, I guess, the best of both worlds from my dad, as he always says. And so, hi, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Shout out to my hubby for helping me continue this hunting journey. I mean, I'd hunt even if my husband didn't hunt, but the fact that we get to do it together and hunt together and have strategies and game plans together is just awesome, especially, I get to share my life with this man, and now I get to share my ultimate passion in life with him as well. So, hey, Andrew, love you. Shout out to my good friend, Trevor Dreyer. He's pretty awesome hunter, and the fact that, he's allowed my husband and I to hunt his property, help him manage his property. I've shot several deer on his property, so was my hubby. And so thanks, Trevor, for letting us be a part of that. And shout out to my mom for getting into hunting and actually wanting to get into hunting and experience it with me. And especially that she's figuring out that when I say shh, it means we gotta be quiet because there's a deer coming. And if I say don't turn around, there's a deer coming, that she's actually not turning around anymore. So that's pretty exciting. So I guess, so just my friends and family. Hey, guys, love you all.
Thanks so much, Audrey Pfaffe, for being a part of the Whitetail Rendezvous tribe across North America. And we continue to grow simply because of people like Audrey that just shares as she has these last two episodes. So on behalf of Whitetail Rendezvous, Audrey, thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, folks, make sure you listen to the next episode. AJ Gall, community director of Legendary Whitetails, is going to talk to us about his rut forecast for 2016. It's going to break it down into 4 different segments or targets or indicators, as I like to say, of the rut. So stay tuned. It's going to be an awesome show. You're going to tell your friends and neighbors all about it.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.